Hello. I'm not sure who that wee black car is meant to belong to. It looked like the kind of thing Ronnie might drive, so I assume him. But anyway, welcome to the launch of the Nordic Casks by Berry Brothers and Rudd. My name is Johnny McMillan, and I have the privilege of being one of the spirits buyers at Berry Brothers. We are one of the oldest wine and spirit merchants in the world, and I believe we're the oldest independent bottler of Scotch whisky as well, which is pretty cool. And being an independent bottler today does have its own challenges. It's very tricky to find good casks at good prices, but there's also a lot of amazing parts about being an independent bottler as well. And we're very fortunate to have kind of vast stocks of what I would kind of class as a kind of Grand Cru Scotch whiskies, and we can release amazing casks from Ben Nevis, Bamore, Kalila, and when we do. People generally love them, and people buy them, and it's fantastic. Hello, Gunnar. But I think as an independent bottler, an established independent bottler, it's quite important to occasionally kind of nail your colours to the mast and to talk about a region of whiskey which is not maybe quite as kind of in vogue as Scotch, and that really means looking over the sort of mountainous horizons of Scotch whisky to world whisky. Now, as a Scotsman, and occasionally a bit of a tribal Scotsman, I have to admit that I have in the past really lacked the passion for world whisky. I've never really had that kind of desire to just know everything about a region as I do for Scotch. Certainly there are drams from around the world that have really captured my attention. I'm thinking of like the bourbon from Rocktown. I think is just world class. And recently we bottled a single malt from Lark, which I thought was wonderful. Really amazing bottles that I just love to open. But until recently, I've never had that same kind of proper chronic anorak need to know everything about a region. Now that started to change steadily in 2018. When Berry Brothers and Rudd had the opportunity to distribute High Coast in the UK. And we started that process by getting Lars and Roger from the distillery over to London to do some tastings and some trainings. And I was really blown away, first of all, by the character and quality of the spirit, but actually kind of moreover by Lars and Roger themselves, and this kind of quiet confidence and vision they had and have to create something that is authentically Swedish, that has character and has integrity. And for me, there is no nobler goal of a new distillery than to create something with character that kind of plows its own furrow. And then shortly after that, a good friend of mine gave me some samples of Fary Lochan. And again, I'd never heard of this distillery, but I was quite taken by this very small distillery in a patch of woodland in Jutland that was making just the most tremendously structured whiskey I've ever tried. It's just got the most amazing viscosity about it. And I heard it was they were using nettles to smoke their barley, which again, to me seems like innovation for the right sort of reasons. So fast forward nearly 2 years, and Berry Brothers have now bought from 15 or so different Nordic distilleries, including Newfill from many of them. So this is really an area that we're backing. And for me, it is a region where pretty much all the distilleries are founded by or run by real card-carrying, Glencairn glass-wearing nerds, and I love it. It's absolutely a region that is focused on character and quality. And I think if we come back in 5 years or so, people are going to be talking about the Nordics in exactly the same way people are talking about Tasmania today as a very progressive, innovative whiskey region. And if you kind of frame a reference like mine as Scotch, then I think it's quite an easy region to kind of get your head around as well. It's kind of very beautiful, mountainous landscape to the north, which I feel is quite integral to love of Scotch whiskey, and a gentle rolling farmland to the south. The people of the Nordics, very similar to the Scots, are kind of wise and charismatic and ruggedly handsome and very modest as well. And on the subject of wise, charismatic and handsome Nordic people, we are going to be joined by some of the finest of them this evening. My very diligent, hardworking colleague, Claire Tesh, and I have been working on this tasting for the last few months. And we are going to be joined by two of the most authoritative commentators from within the Nordic region, and also by someone from each of the distilleries that we're going to taste through. So I think it's going to be a really great evening of learning about Nordic whiskey for myself and for everyone else. And at the end, we do plan to get everyone back on screen, so both the commentators and all the distillers, for a question and answer session. So if you've got any questions to the distillers or Nordic whiskey in general, please put them into the comment section, and Claire, who is very unglamorously managing the engine room this evening, will post the best ones up for the distillers to look at. So without further ado, and the order we're going to taste them in, crucially, I knew I was going to forget that. The order we're going to taste them in is going to be the Kiro first. We're then going to move to the Fary Lochan. We're then going to have the High Coast, and last but by no means least, the Myken, and then the Q&A at the end. So without any further ado, our first guest. So when we kind of came up with this concept for the Nordic casks, I was acutely aware that I am neither Nordic nor an expert on Nordic whiskey. I'm not an expert on anything, never mind Nordic whiskey. So I asked my good friend Lars Carlson at High Coast, who I could speak to that would maybe know the distillers and be able to maybe make some introductions. And Lars introduced me to a man that has become the Nordic Obi-Wan Kenobi to my Scottish Luke Skywalker. This is a man called Thomas Obom, who writes for Whisky Saga. Whisky Saga is the biggest archive of online tasting notes. I was going to say you're kind of like the Nordic Serge Valentine, but you don't quite have the facial hair.
You're too kind.
How are you doing, Thomas? Are you well?
I'm good. Really looking forward to this.
Good. Well, first of all, as I said, Thomas has really been quite integral to this project. Made a couple of the introductions to distillers tonight and others we've bought from in the future, as well as sending me this huge box of Nordic samples to help kind of expand my frame of knowledge. So firstly, a real massive thank you to Thomas for your help so far. Thomas, I know that a bit like me, you started life as a Scotch nerd, straight out the womb and suckling on Brora. But then you kind of migrated to Nordic whiskey. Can you tell us when did Nordic whiskey start to kind of take your interest?
Must have been around 2010, 2011 that I first tried some Nordic whiskey. It must have been Mackmyra or box whiskey at first. And I was starting to go to festivals in Sweden around that time. But I really got into Nordic whiskey when I attended the Box Academy or High Coast Academy. I spent a week, paid a lot of money to go and work for the Swedes at the High Coast Distillery, and that was a week-long religious experience. And I just fell in love with all that attention to detail, to quality in all the aspects of making whiskey. So yeah, that's how it started.
Cool. And I was hoping you could give really me and everyone listening a sort of potted history of Nordic whiskey, kind of zero to where we are now.
Yeah, I'll try. There's going to be a lot of facts that I miss out on, of course, but in the old days, late 19th century, I know for a fact there were at least 2 distilleries in Sweden, one in Norway, probably ones in Finland and Denmark as well.
Making whiskey.
Yeah, making whiskey. Illegally, there was distillers all over Norway and probably all the other Nordic countries as well. Mid-20th century, we had Clock in Denmark. They started up in 1947, produced a whiskey that was not known for good quality, really. Launched in 52 and continued to sell until early 70s. You had in Sweden in 1955, they started production of what became the Shepherd's whiskey, also not really known to be a good whiskey.
Have you tasted these?
Sorry?
Have you tasted these? Are they old bottles?
No, this was launched in 61 and only sold for a few years. 81, you had Alko in Finland. They made some also not highly regarded whiskey, but then in modern day whiskey production that in the Nordics, that really started with Makumira in Sweden in 1999. Then you had in Finland 2 years later, Panimo Ravintola Bear Hunters. They started distilling whiskey. Then you had Terranpeli in 2002. Denmark, I'm not absolutely certain who started distilling first, but Stauning and Bramstein, they started up approximately around the same time. Spirit of Ven in Sweden, 2007. In Norway, first whiskey production in 2009 at the Norske Brenneri. And then Fary Lochan, who we have with us today, started 2009. Box or High Coast 2010. Kiro 2014. And Myken also 2014. And all in all, today there's more than 50 active whiskey distilleries in the Nordics.
And more planned, do you know?
There's more planned, yeah. But how many? I don't know. There's new plans being brought forward every month, and it's becoming very hard to keep track of all the new Nordic whiskies that are being released. I started out trying to review every single Nordic whiskey, and I've reviewed close to 300. I'm at 280 something on my blog so far, but there's no way. Yeah. I cannot manage to do them all.
It's quite a tricky question, but do you think there's a Nordic character?
I think that the thing that comes to my mind first is that there's this focus to quality all the time, and it's very expensive to produce anything in the Nordics, and the Nordic distilleries are typically quite small, so they will never be able to compete in quantity and low prices. So it's quality focus all the way.
Yeah. Okay. So Thomas and I are going to co-host for the first couple of drams, and then Thomas is going to take a little break to enjoy the drams and then come back in at the end. So the first dram we're going to have is Kiro. Now, when I first tasted this sample, I very gushingly sent an email to Mika and Kala from the distillery saying, "This is the best rye whiskey I've ever tasted." And then I kind of I thought about this a couple of months later, and I thought, is it really the best rye whiskey I've ever tasted? Surely not. And I went back and tasted it, and it really is the best rye whiskey I've ever tasted. So I'm very happy to have two of the founders from Kiro here this evening. We've got Mika, hello, and Kala.
Hello, greetings from Isokyrö.
Cool. Thank you very much for joining us. Can you start off, just tell us a little bit about Kiro, and then a wee bit about the cask that we've got from you this evening as well, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So we indeed were founded in 2014, or started market operations in 2014 after going on this epic run of training to distill all across Europe. And I think for us, the first touch with fellow Nordic distillers and European distilling scene was a great one, where we really got the feeling that it's a communal business. Everybody's out there to help everybody else. It was easy to get into. We just phoned up people, can we work with you for a weekend? And like you, Thomas, we also paid Springbank a lot of money to come and work. So you have to start somewhere with the
it feels good though.
Espionage. It does. But I mean, we got the idea for Kiro actually in a sauna, as we Finns do. In 2012, and that came off the back of us having gotten acquainted with rye whiskies through Drew Mayville of great American rye whiskey fame, and his introduction to the antiques collection at Buffalo Trace. So our sort of forefathers were in North American distilling scene as far as rye goes, but we've gone our own way since then. And Kalle, if you want to speak about the cask and liquid a bit.
Yeah, certainly. Greetings from Isokura. I'm at the distillery at the moment, so you can see the beautiful stills in the background. Unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, we are distilling at the moment, so I need to be in the control room, so we don't get that clear picture of the stills behind. But yeah, the cask. This is actually distilled back in 2016 after our own gin craze. We had to stop whiskey production for 1 year, and in 2016 we got back in track with the whiskey with the new stills. So this being distilled there, 100% rye, like all our whiskeys, malted rye, and like you see in my background, pot still distilled and then aged in first actually in New American oak and then transferred to in an ex-bourbon barrel. So this is this beautiful baby we are having now in the glass.
And this is, I'm right in saying, the first independent bottling of Kiro's whiskey as well. Good. Well, we're humbled to have it. Thank you very much. Thomas, what do you think of this one?
I think this is wonderful. And I have to apologize, Mika, that I haven't visited the distillery yet. I remember we were even talking about me visiting not that long before the pandemic hit. I was in Japan visiting distilleries there and talking about visiting Kiro in Finland. So, and that's another thing. The Nordic distilleries, they really look to Japan as well as look to Scotland in production. So this is wonderful stuff.
I think what I love about this for me is it just kind of has the kind of like spicy impact that you kind of expect from rye whiskey, but actually the complexity of a really good malt as well. And I guess is that the malted rye coming into it, or more your climate compared to the American climate? Or?
Yeah, well, it's a combination of all the techniques we are using. Basically, already the malting gives us a complexity, but also in the fermentation, we cap the temperature, make a very longer fermentation for 6 days, distill it with all grains in pot stills, doing really wide cuts because we have a beautiful mash, fermented mash already. And then when we age it, we use a combination of barrels, which gives also a bit more complexity to the rye. So it's basically all the steps in the production which affect the way it is. And also when we chose to go for 100% rye, we knew that we need to do something that it's not just a punch in the face, but there is more in the rye, and that's what we also see, that there is so much unleashed potential in rye, which we are wanting to experiment in the future.
Clearly, yeah. So can you guys give us a wee kind of insight into the Finnish whiskey scene as well? You know, what's it in terms of other distillers and sort of whiskey drinkers and their view on you? What's happening in Finland at the moment?
Sure, absolutely. So Finland is definitely a developing scene. We are and we were and still to an extent are a closed up, monopolized country with the government controlling the alcohol sales of hard liquor. And that means, the development has been stunted a bit here and there. We used to be cognac drinkers, then gradually transforming into whiskey drinkers, though we'll never catch you in Sweden. So it's we are still so far behind, but the whiskey is coming up. We've got these two early adapters in Beer Hunters and Teerenpeli, and now we've got more distilleries popping up. We're obviously trying to make everybody to make rye. So we want the rye scene to really come up from Finland, since we love our rye bread and rye everything. So we're trying to get everybody in on it. But there's beautiful, like more Scottish style single malts being made. There's rye made by at least 3 distillers, and And the drinking scene and the hobbyist scene is fast developing as well, with two major sort of whiskey drinkers clubs and smaller ones popping all over.
Are you finding that malt drinkers are quite happy to drink rye whiskey, or is there a bit of sort of snobbery about it?
Well, it depends. We've actually chosen. This might sound a bit arrogant, but we've chosen not to care that much. We care about quality. We care about making exceptional whiskey in our own way, and we hope that people will get on it. But we also recognize that if, let's say, you've been a fan of Lagavulin or Ardbeg for 40 odd years, we're not going to come and tell that we're somehow better than the Scottish tradition or better than the US tradition. We go our own path.
No, I mean, I think if anyone tastes a liquid, they'll kind of come round to your way of thinking pretty quickly. So tell me, sort of rye, because I'm aware that rye bread is a big thing in the Nordics. What kind of rye? What rye does rye play? What role does rye play in Nordic culture?
Well, it's a massive role. I mean, it's a hardy crop, and especially in Finland, and I'm pretty sure in most of Sweden and Norway as well, the rye we plant is winter rye. So it goes into the ground after harvest, and it goes under the snow in order to then, when the thawing comes in the spring, it starts growing and we get to harvest. But the season is so short that we can't really plant a lot of spring rye, at least yet. So it's this started out as a rotational crop, but it's had its own agricultural niche always in Finland, and as we've made bread, we've made various other things, including glue, out of it. So we wanted to really explore that, as Kalle said, that wide band of tastes that we can get out of rye with different sort of fermentation, yeast, and all other methods.
And in terms of varietals of rye, because there's quite a conversation going on in Scotch at the moment about barley varietals and people looking towards heirloom varietals of barley. Is that the same with rye, or is there just kind of one rye that everyone uses?
We use multiple different varieties. A couple of them are really traditional ones, and a couple of them are hybrid ones. The taste differences are minimal compared to the way we of the effect of the production methods we are using, like thinking of the yeast we are using, which has a very powerful fermentation character, the long fermentation, and then also the cask. So we've seen not that much difference between the Finnish rye varieties we've been using. So, and the main thing for us has been to select ryes which have a really good qualities for malting, but also obviously you've tasted a rye. It's a quite it has a powerful character in it, and we are quite happy with that. Yeah.
It's just enormously complex, which I think is the main thing that takes me really. And for me, that is kind of, I saw someone, I think Arthur from Royal Mile mentioned that it is very different from American rye. And, I totally agree that it's just super complex. What was your own, what's your kind of inspiration for this? Or did you really start out kind of knowing that you'd make something really pretty different from other ryes out there?
Yeah,
well,
sorry.
Yeah.
Two Finnish people talking at one time,
exactly.
that is a record, surely.
It is. It's never happens in a sauna. So what I was adding to what Kalle was saying previously about the Finnish rye versus let's say North American. We visited this home of American craft whiskey, MGP distillers, in Lawrenceburg, Indiana, which produces a lot of U.S. craft whiskeys and
that well-known micro distillery.
Yeah, exactly. Their head of production told us that he doesn't buy U.S. rye anymore. He buys rye from Germany, from Sweden, from Finland, since the North American rye provides such a different and, in his words, a bit hollow taste profile. So I think that when choosing the origin of the rye and our production methods, that took us our own way. But Kalle, go ahead and.
Yeah. If I can add to the rye as well, like it's the main like Mika said, it tastes like a hollow rye. That's because of the grain size. In Finland, the rye grows smaller, the grains are smaller, and most of the taste components are in the cell walls and not in the starch in the middle. So if we have bigger grains, we have less of the spicy and the richness of rye in it. But yeah, for the inspiration, like Mika already said, we went to Scotland to Springbank for distilling before we started our own production, and we were all malt whiskey lovers, but then again rye lovers, and I think our whiskey is kind of a combination of the both worlds. I tend to say it's kind of the lost cousin between the Scottish malt whiskey and American rye whiskey, but because there was no tradition of making rye whiskey in Finland, we had the challenge, but also the freedom to choose our own way of making rye, and so it's kind of a combination of the US methods and then the Scottish ones and combined in our own way. So basically, we use malted grain, 100% malted grain, but it's rye. In the fermentation, we have a cap temperature, a long fermentation, having also the lactic acid fermentation happening there, and like a controlled environment, which is more daily business in the US. But then in the distillation, you can see the beautiful pot stills. We chose the pot still method actually to, after a lot of experimenting, to actually create this really smooth but full-bodied new make distillate. And then in aging, we combine new barrels, new American oak, and then ex-bourbon, which gives us a little bit more complexity, but also the true choice of making more balanced whiskey than with using one style of barrel. And of course, additionally, we have some wine casks aging, which are also a really beautiful thing. And to add a little bit more finishness, we also wanted to add, and there's an upcoming cold range product for Kiro, which is a wood smoked rye whiskey, which is more where the rye is smoked in an old barn with an older wood smoke. So we have also the smoke element, which is, I think, when at least as Nordic than the rye as well. And so we have two smoky versions coming up in the future as well.
And I think you've agreed Berry Brothers are getting the first independent bottlings of those as well. Is that correct? Good, thank you. Final question, which is a very Scottish question, and I'm sorry about this, but I'm going to ask it. How old do you think you'll go? I mean, you know, rye whiskey is not really known for kind of deep age. It is kind of young and feisty, and that's kind of one of the beautiful things about it. What do you think? How old do you think you could try to get it?
Well, it's a good question. Having started a distillery about 7 years ago, it's a very early stage to ask how old it can go. But we've seen casks that are absolutely beautiful at 2 years. We've seen some that are at 5-6 years now. It's hard to say. We'll probably never say never, but probably not putting age statements on our bottles. It's definitely more about the different characters and different variations of taste profiles we can blend out. But we'll see. Stay tuned, and well, you've got some casks at 0 day, so How long
Well, I
do you
was
want to
just
keep
thinking
them?
that. Yeah, we've got some new fills, so we can put an age statement on it. We can have some 40-year-old Kiro. That's fine. Cool. Well, guys, thank you very, very much. I've really enjoyed that, and some great comments as well. A lot of people, again, I think the kind of overarching feeling is just a wonderfully beautiful, complex whiskey, and even. I'm enjoying two things. First of all, some nice comments from Par from Smogan, who's a very hard man to please, and also that everyone is calling Ingvar Rond Alice, who's logged in his daughter's account. So I think we're going to call Ingvar Alice from now on. But guys, thank you very, very much for joining us. Hopefully you're going to stick around and join us for the question and answer later. So thank you very much. Mika and Kala shall gently disappear off the screen. Now, we're going to be joined by two of the founding family from a distillery, which I hope Diageo don't sue me for this, and they may well, but I kind of see this as like the sort of Lagavulin of the Nordics, in the sense of the fact that it's got a real smoky character. It's not kind of the same intense smokiness, but just the physical structure of this whiskey is just incredible. So we've got Thomas and we've got Morten, who are both founding family of Fary Lochan.
Hello.
Hello, Thomas.
Hello.
And hello, Morten. Wonderful.
Hi, guys.
How are you doing? You both well?
Sorry?
Are you both well?
Oh, yes. Thank you very much.
Enjoying the Kiro?
I did. Had a lot of sips of the Kiro, and I really like it.
It's tremendous stuff. Tremendous. So I was hoping you could give us a bit of a history of Fary Lochan and tell us about this really incredible dram that we've got.
Yeah, well, we started in 2009. It was started by Jens Erik, the founder of Fary Lochan, and the father of Morten, stepfather of me. He had an idea of making. He wanted to make actually the world's best whiskey in Denmark. Aim for the stars, I guess. Then probably you will end up somewhere along the way. So he had just an idea of making a whiskey in his own way, using fresh nettles, like you said in the beginning, Johnny, to smoke the barley, smoke the malt, which is a family tradition going back many generations when we smoke the cheese. Smoked cheese, at least in Funen, where the island where we come from, is a huge thing. I love it. The rest of my family, my kids, don't love it that much. But smoked cheese is a for me it's a big thing. So and you use fresh nettles to smoke the cheese. So we designed a little smoke oven, or Jens Erik did, and then we use.
I think we have a picture of this. We had some pictures from Kiro as well, actually, but the operator in the back room was not. There we go.
Yes, there we have. That's Morten working in the field. So it's like I said, that's just a very small oven where we light like a bonfire, and we add all the fresh nettles that grow around the lake and the stream in the forest where our distillery is situated. So we pick all the nettles in the summer when they're fresh and they grow like crazy, and we put them in the oven, and we transfer all the smoke from the fresh nettles. The fresh nettles give the same amount of smoke like when you use the peat or whatever you use to smoke with. So we get a different kind of peat or smoke that you will see in our whiskey.
Is the malt wet when it goes over the nettles, or is it dry already? I mean, is it a drying process, or is it just a smoking process?
Same, or both. I would say both. So we dry it, and also we smoke it, and then we give back the smoked malt to the local farmer that brings all the barley to us before we malt it ourselves, and then smoke it with the fresh nettles. He takes it back, and then he dries it, and he comes back with the big bags of smoked malt for us to use. it's a long process. It takes many days just to smoke one batch. So there are years where we only produce maybe only 1 or 2 casks of smoked whiskey. So if there's anybody out there having a full cask of nettle smoked whiskey from Fary Lochan, it's a lucky.
I just think it's an incredible kind of smoked character to it. I mean, so texture aside, which I'm going to come back to, I just think that the smoke is so light, and it's almost. I find when you first come to this whiskey that there's barely any smoke, and then if you leave it for about 5-10 minutes in the glass, the smoke really develops, and actually just a few drops of water for me really bring it out, and it's actually. So I think Jens visited Daft Mill, which is a distillery we're lucky to work with quite closely. And Francis had said, he gave me a tasting note that said it was a bit like garden bonfire. And I totally agree. You know, when you're having a bonfire in the garden and you're putting some sort of wet sort of foliage on there, it's just that kind of beautiful, fresh, smoky smell. Thomas, what do you think of this one?
This is wonderful. I love that it's very smoky, and at the same time it isn't really smoky, and it's so different. I also get a lot of smoky chili, smoky chocolate, smoky tomato plant. It's just fun. It keeps developing.
I think it's a great whiskey. You know, if you want a whiskey with character, it's really hard to pick out something that is quite as unique but wonderful as this. I'm a really big fan of this, I have to say.
That's so what people say when they taste our smoked whiskey. They refer it to as a green smoke, or a lighter, mild green smoke. And the 3 things you mentioned is that, you know, it's not like the very salty smoke from that you get from some of the islands, but it's a lighter. And for people, maybe if people don't like to drink smoked whiskey, this could be a way to get into it, I would say.
I thoroughly agree. So can you guys tell us a bit about what's happening in the Danish whiskey scene? I mean, I know that Fary Lochan, similar to a couple of other distilleries, have got a pretty crazy fan base. You know, what's the Danish whiskey scene like in terms of other distillers and your fans as well?
Well, yes, Denmark. There's a big scene for Danish whiskey, not just Fary Lochan whiskey, but Danish whiskey, and they are popping up new distilleries in Denmark every year, every month. I've almost said, because, like you said in the beginning, there are maybe 50 distilleries in the Nordic countries. When I did a little bit of research this afternoon about Danish whiskey distilleries, I think I could count up to 25. So let's say there is actually 50 in the Nordics, then half of them are in Denmark. I don't know if that's 100% true, but there are about 25 Danish distilleries now. And 15 years ago, there were none, maybe one. When we started in 2009, that like you said, Thomas, in the beginning, there was Stauning and Braunstein, also at a small distiller in an island called Bornholm. But so back in 2009, we were among the first ones, and now, like 10 years later, 12 years later, we are 25, more or less, distilleries. So it's a big market, and there's a big scene for Danish whiskey, and the production obviously is not very big, not with us, not with any of the other of our colleagues in the Danish whiskey business. If you take out Stauning of that picture, then we produce around. We fill around 50 casks per year, 50 casks of 200 liters, more or less. Maybe this year a little bit more, and we are increasing. When we started out the year 1, 2009, we filled 1 cask. So we developed as well, and we are increasing as well. But like now we are talking internationally. We have you guys from Fary Brothers, which is fantastic for us. But I mean, the demand for our whiskey and Danish whiskey in general is higher than the supply from us Danish whiskey producers. Again, not taking Stauning into consideration in this one.
Do you think you might expand in the future?
Us, Fary Lochan, or Denmark?
Well, it's unlikely. Denmark tried to expand before, and it cost our monks dearly. But I know I meant more about the distillery.
Yes, of course we will. How much and how quick, I don't know. But yes, the demand for our whiskey, the interest of Fary Lochan is just increasing day by day, more or less. So obviously, yes, we want to expand. Do we want to expand to be? We still want to keep it local. We still want to use local products. We still want to keep everything as a handcraft. We want to when we fill the bottles, we want to do it by hand. Not that we really want to do it by hand, but that's what we do.
So it feels like the right thing to do. Yeah.
Four bottles at a time, and we add the corks on top by hand as well. And I think that's a part of the history. That's a part of the story about Fary Lochan and Danish whiskey in general, not being a mainstream product or mainstream whiskey. We want to keep the high quality and the good story about our whiskies, not just Fary Lochan whiskey, but Danish whiskey in general.
One thing that I certainly noticed straight off the bat when I tasted this whiskey, and a lot of the comments say, I think, again, not to keep coming back to Parr, who's a very difficult man to please. He really is a very difficult man to please. He said you did knife and fork for this whiskey, and you could almost like fry onions in this. It is so thick, and if I encourage everyone at home to do the old Jim McEwen trick and just rub a bit in between their fingers. It's just the most oily, heavily structured whiskey I've ever tasted, and for me that is really high praise. Me and Doug at Fary Brothers both always talk about mouthfeel, and there's just nothing better than a really good chewy whiskey, and it is really difficult to achieve that without kind of getting those sort of fainty flavors, which this whiskey absolutely doesn't have. What do you think is the trick to this really heavy structure?
Well, the spirit stills that we the pot still and the wash still that we use from Foresights, we had an idea to make a special design of these stills with that shorter.
I think we have a picture. If Claire is awake, she may well have drifted off. There we go. Wonderful. So they're from Forsyth, are they?
Yes, they are. So and this one is the wash still. This is the bigger one of ours. This is 1,200 liters to do the first distillation. In the very beginning, when we started back in 2009, we had a wash still of 300 liters and a spirit still of 200 liters. So wow. when they were delivered to us by the transport company, I thought that this must be a mistake. I've never seen a whiskey still that small. And for sites, also they told us that actually these are the smallest whiskey stills that they have ever made for a professional use, which I guess is why they also gave us a place in line a bit ahead of everybody else, so we didn't have to wait several years to get the cask or the stills. But the shorter neck in our stills are an idea of Jens Erik from the founder of Fary Lochan. So he thought that with the shorter neck, there will be a shorter way for the alcohol to keep all the oil and rich taste and flavors that's in the glass right now, and you can see it also on the inside of the glass. So I think that his idea of he didn't know about this. It was a guess, but with a qualified guess. To get a rich, oily, powerful whiskey or a new spirit with these shorter necks.
Do you run the stills quite quickly?
Do we what?
Do you distill quite quickly? I mean, generally speaking, in Scotland, people talk about still running quite quickly and getting the kind of heavier elements, and slower gives you a more refined spirit.
Not sure. Are we distilling quickly, Morten?
No, it's a slow distillation.
If you're a cooker, I think it would probably be solid. It would just kind of plump at the bottle, so probably a good thing.
Yeah.
No, it's really.
The wash will take approximately 20 hours for one distillation.
Okay, yeah, for a tiny little still, that is quite a long time.
Yeah, so it's a slow distillation, absolutely.
And do you think your whiskey works better in bourbon or sherry? Because I know this is obviously a bourbon cask with the smoked, but I know the other one we bought from you, the other mature cask we bought is in sherry, and it just, I mean, it's kind of like, it's sort of like Mortlach, and it's wonderful kind of thick, chewy consistency. I mean, do you prefer your whiskey in sherry or in bourbon?
I prefer in sherry, and the last years opened my eyes for our oily and heavy whiskey in PX and Oloroso sherry cask. It's a perfect match.
Yeah, I'm excited. The second one we've got is we re-racked it into a Moscatel cask, and it's looking pretty good. So I think we're going to give it another few years, but it's really, really good. So guys, thank you very much for joining us. Massively appreciated, and again, I hope you'll stick around for the Q&A later on. Thomas as well. The other Thomas is going to drop out. So guys, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Cool. So Thomas is going to go and relax for a little bit, and I'm going to be joined by another of the commentators we have now. This is someone that I had not made their acquaintance before we started working on this little project. But anyone that I mentioned the name Emma Anderson to sort of speaks in quite hushed, reverential tones about the sort of dawn of the Nordic whisky industry. So we are very lucky to be joined by Emma Anderson, who is the founder and editor of magazine Alt Whisky, who should pop onto screen now.
Hello.
Emma, your backdrop couldn't be any more Nordic. I mean, maybe if you had a sauna and like
I've done my best.
Like knitted rug in there. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Is this your house?
No, I wish it was, but it's actually the place where we rent a little office in. So it's not even our office, but anyway.
That's just.
I could have said it was my own, couldn't I?
You could have, yeah. I mean, if you said this little cabin up in the
yeah, I know. That was stupid.
Yeah. No. Well, thank you much for joining us, Emma.
Thank you.
What did you think of the first two drams?
It was just. I have tried Kiro before a few times, a few different ones, and I just love that rye whiskey. I don't know, it has taken me some time to get used to rye whiskey, and now I'm just in love with this style of whiskey, and I think they've done a brilliant job. And our second whiskey today, I mean, that is something totally different. It's so fresh at the same time as it has a lot of these like you said, bonfire kind of notes, and that is really cool, and together with the rest of it, I don't know, it's an interesting whiskey, very. So
well, two great drams.
Looking forward to it. Very different.
We have two great drams coming up as well.
Yeah,
But I was hoping we could take a little break, and I was hoping. So a question I had for you is, you know, in Scotland we're all very proud of Scotch whisky, and we love Scotch whisky, and everything else is a bit rubbish. But what's it like in the Nordic scene? What do Nordic whiskey drinkers think of Nordic whiskey? Is it kind of an inferior second to Scotch, or is there now an increasing kind of patriotism about it?
I think it varies quite a lot, actually, because I've seen, I mean, there's of course a lot of people that, I mean, support everything that comes from Nordic countries, and they are so like pride for their nationality, and I don't know, they buy all kinds of whiskey casks and limited edition whiskey that is launched here and from all over the world, of course. But I think that people are more and more proud of that their countries are actually producing whiskey, and it's here to stay, I think. So I think it's growing on the people in the Nordics too. And of course, it takes some time for people to know about the distilleries and the whiskeys. It takes time to produce whiskey and to get the word out there. But I really, really think that this is something that most people is and will be really proud of.
It'll be interesting to see in a few years. I've probably worked for berries too long, but some sales data of, you know, is Scotch whisky sales declining in the Nordics in favor of indigenous whiskey, which I guess, you know, be a tricky thing to measure. But Thomas was kind enough to give us a background of Nordic whiskey, and I'm going to ask you to do a horrible thing for someone who's going to have the video up online for a few years afterwards. But what are your predictions for Nordic whiskey? Where do you see this region going over the next sort of decade or so?
Well, I mean, if we compare it to like whiskey from Scotland, or I mean, we're just a little baby, you know. So I absolutely think that the curiosity from international countries will continue to grow. I mean, we see that now, and it has been around for a few years, and I mean, more and more people actually get to know the whiskies from the countries and get the opportunity to taste it. I think it's going to grow. Unfortunately, I don't think that all of the distilleries will survive. We all know that it's extremely, I mean, really extremely, I mean, it costs a lot of money to start a distillery. And I don't know, a few of the distilleries obviously will not survive, I think. But I think that we have a very bright future. And I think that the world will know that we're around to stay, I think.
I think it's interesting. I mean, two things. Firstly, you know, you say the industry's just a baby compared to Scotch, and yeah, I mean, it is. I agree, but also you got to remember that that malt whiskey has only really been sort of in vogue again for the last couple of decades, and before that it was kind of, you know, on its arse. So, you know, Nordic whiskey is kind of getting a bit of a kind of steroid boost by coming into a market which is super buoyant. And I kind of wonder, I've been interested to see, since I've kind of had this little Nordic bug in my brain, to see on Facebook a lot of chat from the Asians about Nordic whiskey as well. And you know, people like Ho Cheng, who I know distributes High Coast in Taiwan, has an amazing palate and is really well respected. And he seems to just love Nordic whiskey. And I kind of wonder if, you know, the further you are from Scotland, if actually the Nordics in Scotland seem like quite a similar offering, you know?
Could be. I don't actually know, but maybe that could be actually I mean, maybe that could be. But another thing that I might be a positive thing for the new upcoming Nordic whiskies, I think, is that we haven't got the same. No one have expectations on what it would taste like. Is it going to be rye whiskey, or is it going to be a single malt? I think that we are quite, I don't know how to explain it, but free in a way. And I think that might be a positive thing when we come out. I mean, we have a lot of different opportunities, I think.
But certainly something I was saying the other day that, you know, these drams are 4 amazing drams, but stylistically they are totally different. They are not in any way a progression from another, which is lovely.
No,
But anyway, I feel like I'm in your sort of like Nordic cabin chatting away. So I'm aware there's also people watching who want to drink the next whiskey. And
Yeah.
they should. So the next whiskey is from the mighty High Coast in Sweden, which if we refer to as Box, we'll get sued by Bacardi. But I think we are going to be joined by the wonderful Lars Carlson, who should pop up on the screen any second.
Yay.
Hello, Lars.
Hi.
Are you well?
Yeah, I'm very good. It's a bit chilly in here, but it's okay.
Welcome.
I have some drams to keep me warm, so it's great.
So I was really pleased. I was super pleased to see Serge's review of 90 points for this whiskey on Whiskey Fun, which, you know, I kind of think, you know, if I have a distillery in my life, I will consider I've made it when Serge goes on a whiskey 90 points. You know, I mean, that's kind of like, you know, it's sort of like graduation.
I'm really happy he got all my wine bottles I sent to him before. So no, it's really.
I think it's
a
a case of Riesling per point. Yeah. Well, Lars, welcome. Can you tell us a little bit about High Coast and also what's in this frankly phenomenal whiskey?
Sure. High Coast Distillery started in 2010. We're situated in not the northern part of Sweden, but around 500 kilometers north of Stockholm. So we get quite a big temperature differences during the summer and the winter. In the summer, or the one day that is summer up here, is maybe like 30 degrees Celsius. And in the winter, it can be really, really cold. So maybe down to minus 30 degrees Celsius. When we started, we had 2 pot stills and 3 washbacks, and we produced around 100,000 liter pure alcohol a year. But from 2018, we increased the capacity of the distillery so we now have 4 pot stills and 7 washbacks. So, and from February this year, we actually produce at maximum capacity, so around 300,000 liter pure alcohol a year. So we're not that small anymore. We're growing, but we have been able to grow because a lot of people want to buy our whiskey. So we're very happy to be able to produce more for the market.
Lars, Lars, can I just ask something? Do you? I mean, there are so many different types of whiskey that we're trying today. And would you say there's such a thing as like Swedish whiskey style, or do you see that coming up in some way?
I think there is around, I'm not sure, something around 15 or 20 or 15 or 17 Swedish distilleries or companies that have produced whiskey in Sweden. So, and all are quite different in style, I would say. So it's hard to say that it's a typical Swedish style of making whiskey. I think that the one thing that we all in the Nordic have in common is we don't have that much of like old whiskey in our warehouse. We lack a lot of 30-year-old whiskey in our warehouse. So for the moment, but give us 20 or 30 more years and we will have really, really old and great stuff as well, I think.
Maybe that is our style, that it is very I mean, very different, and we have a lot of different styles. Maybe that's our thing. Who knows?
Yeah, I think so. For High Coast, we have always looked for. We do 2 different styles of whiskey. We do both peated and we also do non-peated whiskey. And our unpeated whiskey is we have looked more to make a whiskey similar to the whiskeys in Japan. So it should be very well balanced and quite light in style. And then the peated whiskey is much more like an echo of Islay for us.
And
So
this one is unpeated. This is unpeated style.
yes, yes.
But it's still got a wonderful kind of like smoky bacon thing about it, which, you know, for me, I really reminds me of, and this is the highest compliment I could possibly pay, it reminds me of Brora. And actually, oddly, I found the same note in some Smoggins as well, this kind of like smoked bacon thing.
Yep.
Why do you think that is? Is that purely coming from the sherry, or?
Yeah, I think that in this case, I think it comes from the sherry. In Smergen's case, I think Per is much more the right guy to answer on the question where the bacon notes comes from in his spirit. But in this case, I think it's from the sherry hogshead that this whiskey was maturing on. So
I think this is really incredible. You know, I mean, I said on the back of the bottle in my tasting notes, I think this is one of the best sherry casks Barry's have released for some years, and I'm kind of struggling really to think of something we've released that has really beaten this. It's an absolutely phenomenal dram. So thank you very much.
I'm glad you like it.
Emma, what are your thoughts on this one?
I just love how intense it is. I mean, just from nosing it, it's just keeps on giving you more and more like different notes. It starts up at something and then it just continue to evolve. I mean, somehow, you know, different layers over on top of each other. It's I don't know. This is something that I would love to just, sit like this and just, you know, relax and chat with your friends and have a long, conversation over, because it's just really brilliant.
We'll all head up to your log cabin for the after party, Emma. If you can put a few more logs on, I'll be there sometime tomorrow afternoon. So, Lars, I was going to ask you a bit of a cheeky question in a way. You know, I see High Coast or Box or High Box as you know, quite unusual in the world of new world producers and new producers, really. I guess young producers is a better way to put it, in that you have a real cult following, and that, you know, there are a few distilleries globally that have managed this, and I'm thinking of Chichibu, I'm thinking of Daft Mill, I think Thompson Brothers, when they start releasing more whiskey, will have a similar thing. Indeed, Smogen in Sweden as well. But what those distilleries all have in terms of cult appeal, and actually, you know, Fary Lochan as well, have this kind of crazy fan base. But those guys are all very, very small. You, I think, are the only distillery I can think of that has achieved this kind of like cult zealotism of your consumers while still being of scale. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think we started with trying to attract the nerds. That was our main mission in the beginning. Since both me and the distillery manager Roger Melander, we are real whiskey geeks, both of us, and come from that background to try to know everything about every cask that we come across. And so our transparency, I think, is one of the things that really attract the whiskey nerds. You can find everything on our website, all the information about the casks, what they weighed before filling, what they weighed when they were filled, after we emptied the casks, and we basically have no secrets, and we just want to help people become better whiskey drinkers. That's like the main mission. And I think that have really attracted the whiskey nerds, and we got a lot of fans just because of this mindset that we want to be really transparent in what we do. And when whiskey nerds like something, they make a big buzz about it, and then all the other guys or girls that is a little bit into whiskey but not really the nerds, they get appealed and want to try the whiskeys as well. So I think
But
that's
don't you think
our
that's
recipe.
sorry, Lars? Don't
No,
you
no
think
problem.
that that's quite? I mean, it seems so easy when you put it like that. That
Yeah,
you,
sure.
but it's not all the whiskey producers is able to do that. I mean, what do you say, to convert from being a enthusiast nerd whiskey to a producer that can charm the rest of the population too. So it must be well, obviously a good job anyway.
It's really good, and it also comes down to we need to keep a high quality, and from what I've tasted so far today is all of the 3 drams so far, I think is really good quality and high quality. I think that's basically the thing that unites us in the Nordic. We are not that big as the Scottish distilleries, and we don't have all the history that the Scots do with 300 years or so producing whiskey. So we need to really be producing high quality whiskey, since we can't compete in quantity at the moment. So
I think it's interesting. I mean, you make a good point in that, I can't really think of another sizable Scottish distillery where the head distiller and the master blender are both quite on the same level of nerd. I mean, when you were across, we had a conversation that would bore anyone else to death about, like the capsules on 1970s Port Ellen or something, and we're kind of on the same level of nerdiness, and that's quite unusual to find, especially people that actually have a steer in how a distillery is marketed as well, and the sort of how the distillery is perceived by the public. Often, sort of nerds are sort of shunned to the side a little bit, as they well should be in my case, I guess. But I was one final question for you, Lars. As a Scotch nerd, and you are definitely a Scotch nerd. I mean that nicest way possible. What do you think are the differences in trends between Sweden and Scotland?
I would say that Swedish people or the Swedes, we have some really big whiskey fairs in Sweden. Some of the biggest in the world, I think, with the Stockholm Whiskey Fair. Emma can surely correct me, but I think it's around maybe 15,000 people visiting every year. So it's quite a big whiskey fair, and Swedish people really get excited about Swedish stuff. So we have a lot of customers that really follows us, and I know Per at Smögen has a lot of followers that really follows him, and same with all the Swedish distilleries for Mackmyra and Ben and everybody. So it's like a really good fan base, and I haven't seen that so much in Scotland with the Scottish population. I think there's more Swedes that are really geeky about, I only drink Lafroig and I have every Lafroig at home, or I really love Kalila. So we're quite geeky in Sweden, I would say.
That's really interesting. That is not the answer I expected at all. But I think it's totally, it's actually completely valid and correct. That is really interesting, actually. Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you very much. I'm aware time's pressing on, but again, I'm hoping you're going to hang about and join in the Q&A at the end. So, Lars, thank you very much. That was a glorious whiskey. I'm just going to put this lamp on because it's getting awfully dark in this room. There we go. Hello, I'm back.
I've seen you trying to fix that during the session here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a very pale man anyway, so I just look like a sort of sheet of paper on a black background.
So we have one last brilliant distillery and guy to bring up to
we do. So this is we have a man whose name I'm going to hopefully pronounce correctly. It's spelled Roar, which is super cool and very masculine, but his name is Ruar. And Ruar is one of the founders of the first distillery to be built in the Arctic Circle, who's hopefully going to pop up now if they have internet in the Arctic Circle.
Hi, welcome.
Hey, hello.
Hello. Are you well?
I should say good evening, London. Here are the votes to the Norwegian show.
Yeah, I was
I was
thinking
really
about
hoping
that
someone was going to make a
earlier.
Eurovision joke. Yeah, absolutely. I've only made one Viking joke so far, but there is still
You've been
room.
good.
Yeah, I can put another, I think, but we'll see. Roar, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Can you tell us a little bit about Myken and indeed about this quite fascinating dram in our glass?
I'll try. It's been kind of scary sitting here, getting a little bit tipsy on all these fantastic brands and trying to follow this. This is some really tough shit to follow. So we'll see. No, Myken, first of all, I think we can probably stake a claim to being the most remote distillery in the world, basically. We are far above the Arctic Circle, even further out into the ocean, 32 kilometers from the nearest mainland. And that's in the middle of nowhere in Norway when you get to the mainland. So going to the nearest town, which is Bodø, takes about 5 hours with a pretty fast passenger ferry. And we regularly see in the winter that the weather is so bad that we have no ferry connection for maybe 14 days in a row. So we stock up on whiskey and a little bit of food.
I think we have a photo of the island.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
If anyone knows me, they'll know I speak about very little other than my children, alcohol, and the Scottish mountains. And I very rarely admit that anywhere is nicer than Scotland. But I mean, my God, it looks incredible.
As long as you don't speak about your children and alcohol in the same sentence, it's probably okay.
No, just go and get another beer.
Yeah, this is half of the houses on our island, and we see our beautiful coastline behind us. So this kind of illustrates also why we are in this place, because my wife and I and the rest of our family, we more or less stumbled across this island 13 years ago on holiday on a sailboat, and we've hardly been able to leave it since. So we decided this is the place that we actually want to stay. There's only 16 people here, so that sounds maybe a bit strange to want to stay in such a place, but those people are so extremely nice that they make up for the lack of other people. And to stay in a place for a long time, you need to have something to make a living from. And this allowed us basically to combine the two greatest loves of our life, single malt whiskey and being in Myken. So it was, well, that too.
So where are you brought up? I mean, where did you live before that?
I used to live just about the same latitude as High Coast in Trondheim. That's sort of in the middle of Norway, which is a 9-hour car drive to the south once you get to the mainland. So it's a place you really have to work to get to. But as Thomas says, you can get here in under 24 hours from Oslo, which is so it is possible.
That's great.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about this?
This whiskey harks. Well, we are so young as a whiskey distillery that we started back in late 2014, and this cask that Johnny managed to talk me into selling to him is actually one of my sort of leftover casks. Not in the sense of being put away from the others, but this was a cask that it took me 6 months to fill up, starting in December in 2016 with about 50 liters of peated spirit. And then whenever I had something left over from filling other casks throughout the spring of 2017, I would put it into this one. So the rest of it was unpeated. So with about 35 ppm in the first batch, we ended up around 8 for the full barrel when it was filled, which was in July of 2017. And I should mention, of course, we don't fill all our casks that way. This was sort of a one-off way of doing it, but it turned out really nice, I think.
So this is really one of a kind.
Yeah, it is.
What do you think of this one, Emma?
This is for me. I haven't even noticed it before. I think this is a bit. It has this like really light smokiness as when you put out a bonfire or something in the background, but it's very light and almost a bit like meadow flowers or something like that, like something light and like fruity.
Yeah, I can live with that.
So for me, I think this sits, and again, I apologize for keep coming back to the Scottish frame of reference, but I am Scottish and I've dedicated my life to Scotch whisky. So for me, it sits in a pretty powerful triumvirate of Talisker, Longrow, and Myken. And it is quite unique in that it's got this, the peaty character is this kind of like fresh bandages, kind of slightly garlicky, quite a savoury style of peat, I think, but very, very delicate and soft. It's not by any means overpowering. And I can't, for me, that's pretty high praise. Talisker is pretty much my favourite distillery.
I can certainly live with that comparison too.
And it has a really nice, fruity sweetness also. That it's a bit like a really nice, it gives it a balance with the smokiness.
Oh, thank you. That's
really nice. Yeah, it's a really nice balance between the fruitiness and the smokiness.
So, Roar, the Norwegian whiskey scene is certainly the youngest of any of the Nordics. Yep. Sweden and Denmark are pretty far ahead, and Finland isn't too far behind. But Norway, there's not a lot of mature distilleries. Where do you think the style's going to go? I kind of see Norway as being like the west coast of Scotland and therefore being heavily peated, but that's not really the case in terms of what's going to develop.
No, I think, that comparison still carries a lot of weight, though, because I think one of the things that really gave us the idea of starting to make whiskey out here was that we sat around looking out into the ocean, sipping some nice Scotch whiskey. And on the back of that box or whatever, it said the distillery was lapped by waves from the Atlantic Ocean, and that gave it character. And we figured if they could say that, we could say that 10 times over out here. We're not laughed, we were overwhelmed by the Atlantic every now and then. But the Norwegian whiskey scene, as you say, it's young and fairly small. And I think, like in many other areas of life, we tend to look up to the Swedes. They are, certainly in this case, our big brothers. The way that Thomas talked about the Whiskey Academy at Den Box sort of woke him up to the Nordic whiskey scene. That's basically maybe half a year later where we got our basic training in making whiskey as well. So it's and that also illustrates how I guess how nice and friendly the whole whiskey scene both in Norway and in the Nordics as a whole is. We all tend to know each other more or less, and nobody ever says no when you ask them for advice or want to discuss how to do things. And I think that's such a wonderful community to be part of. And I used to, before I grew up, I used to be an academic, and that was much more cutthroat, hard world to live in. So I moved over to alcohol, and is a better man for it.
I've just added a little touch of water to this dram, and at this exactly the same time as reading Thomas's comment about resin, it's just like really fresh pine resin. It's an incredible whiskey.
It certainly can take a bit of water, and one thing that's sort of funny, quote unquote, to us is that this whiskey, the way you're presenting it, is of course illegal to sell in Norway. We have a limit of 60% of alcohol. That's the highest you can sell.
Yeah,
but of course,
I was aware of that when I was bottling it.
That
was a conscious decision on my part. It was not a mistake.
Yeah, and I can certainly see that, because we don't want to sell this to Norwegians anyway. We want to be this sort of a little gateway out into the rest of the world for people who haven't been able to get any of our whiskeys so far.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think any future releases of the Nordic Casks may all come in at 59.9, but we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. So you, I think, are probably one of the most remote whiskey producers in the world. I can't. I know there's another in the Arctic Circle now, but they're not on an island in the middle of nowhere.
No, they can get in a car and drive to Tromsø in 2 hours, so that doesn't count.
What kind of challenges does that present as a distiller?
As you might imagine, it does present some logistical challenges. If you cannot get anything in and out of the island for a fortnight at a time, then you better stock up on barley at least. And for us, we distill over live flames very slowly, and we definitely need to get propane gas delivered at no shorter intervals than 2 weeks. So we've been extremely lucky that we haven't had to shut down our production at any point so far, but we sort of keep that in the back of our minds that we might have to every now and then. Just 2 weeks ago, the electricity cable from the mainland snapped off at 250 meters of water depth. That's not something you just fix by the flick of your hand. So we had the generators running here for several weeks on end with lots of noise and pollution and stuff. But now Myken has become sort of a cult place in Norway, I think. So actually, the guys in charge of this stuff paid a couple of million Norwegian kroner and fixed the cable for us, which probably wouldn't have happened if not for the whiskey out here.
Wow.
So what we usually tell people is that we love the whiskey and we love Myken, and putting these two things together is actually sort of a plan to make sure that Myken stays a living society. There will be people living here throughout the year. We have work to do. So it's not only going to be sort of a vacation place for people with houses out here.
And you've all got lovely whiskey to drink as well, which is the more important part.
That helps.
Are you on full capacity, Roar?
Well, right now our full capacity right now is 30,000 liters a year. But I think we are doing somewhere between 20 and 25. But we are working on plans to actually try to quadruple that, get close to 100,000, which is where our friends at Box started, and we plan to end up. But we'll see. Plans like these are kind of fluid anyway. As you grow, you kind of want to grow even a bit more and even a bit more. But for now, at least, getting to 100,000 is our sort of short-term goal. We just built a new, fantastic warehouse. If I do say so myself, probably the most beautiful warehouse in European whiskey. You all need to come and see it. It's called the Whiskey Cathedral because it certainly looks like a cathedral. And there we can store about 2,000 standard 200-liter ex-bourbon barrels. And our aim is to fill that up much quicker than the 10 years it's going to take if we produce at the current rate.
So maybe, Johnny, we will see more of this then.
I was going to say, that's where you keep all the casks you're going to sell to Berry Brothers.
Yeah, exactly.
Berry Brothers section of the warehouse.
Keep in mind, we did like this way of making it. So now we have something to...
maybe I created a problem for myself now.
I think you did, actually. I don't know what everyone out there think, but it looks like they appreciated this a lot. So you might have problems at your hands from now after this. Yeah.
Running around splashing 10 liters into every cask.
Well, I wondered if I think Par mentioned this as well, but you've got to think that actually sitting with so much headspace for a few months actually kind of oxidized the new make immediately in quite a favorable way.
I think that's definitely true. I think that could probably have gone either way, but if it didn't go the right way, we wouldn't have sent it to you. So,
I mean, I often find when we built a split cask, so there's still half a barrel of liquid remaining, or half a cask of liquid remaining for a few months. We get this kind of super speed maturation, which is kind of oxidation, and it can definitely go too far. But under a year, it's generally quite a favourable thing, and you get this nice kind of custard cream character coming through, which I think has maybe had a beneficial effect for this cask. So yeah, if you could just start filling a few for us, that'd be.
I'll see what I can do. Yeah.
Cool. So, Roar and Emma, you were both going to hang about, I think, but thank you very much. This is a truly wonderful dram.
Thank you.
And as if by magic, Claire is going to put everyone back on screen, I hope. Cool, look at that. And everyone's even hung about. I thought at least a few of them might have left.
You haven't lost anyone yet, or?
So. Have we got everyone? I thought we were going to end up with 10.
Now we can play the game Who is Missing. You know, it's like a memory game after 4 drams.
We don't have Morten, but we have Thomas. So
Great.
I think. Oh no, here's Morten. Thomas Lars. Okay, cool. So right, everyone watching, I'm really hoping there's some kind of very probing and insightful comments coming up. But I have one to kick us off with. Now, this is a bit of a precarious question, considering we've just been through a tasting of the Nordic Casks, which Berry Brothers have promoted. But my question is, do you want the world to be talking about Nordic whiskey, or actually do you want the world to be talking about Norwegian whiskey, or Jutland whiskey and Arctic Circle whiskey? And is Nordic whiskey, kind of too wide a term, or do you think that's helpful? I'm going to go for Thomas Obom as a kind of commentator for this first, from a slightly unbiased view.
I think that since it's such a young region of whiskey producing, and the producers are relatively small, I think there's strength in numbers. I think they should definitely look to the international global market. But I think they will all benefit from having a unified front, if you will, going out into the world as Nordic whiskies and promoting the whole region. I think it's going to be a good thing.
Does anyone else feel quite differently to that? I guess I'm maybe looking at Lars as Sweden being the most established. Do you kind of? I'm really struggling not to make a Viking pun, but do you see Sweden kind of conquering the whiskey world, or do you want that to be part of the Nordics?
No, I think we have much more to gain from being a part of the Nordics than being just Swedish whiskey. But we have in some countries we are sold as Swedish whiskey, but in most countries we are sold as the world whiskey. And I think that's a better description of what we do, because there are whiskey producers all over the world. But if we want to marketing together, then I think the Nordic whiskey would be a great way to perceive our way of making whiskey up in the Nordics, I would say.
It's quite an interesting question from Ingvar, who I'm now going to call Alice every time I see him. But Ingvalis asks, would there be a kind of benefit to export of a kind of Nordic whiskey? Because I guess, with Scotch whiskey has the SWA, which is this quite kind of like bullish trade body, which, it gets bad press, but does a lot of good work. But, do you think there'd be a benefit to a kind of Nordic whiskey trade body, or a kind of badge of Nordic whiskey in terms of export? I'm going to go for you, Emma, as the other commentator. Emma, your fire has gone out, by the way.
I know. I absolutely think that there's a big benefit from doing that way to trade. The whiskey abroad and so on. I don't know what about you guys as a producer, but I think that there's, like Thomas said, there's a good thing about the numbers to do things together. Of course, it's difficult sometimes because you're kind of competing against each other in one way, but I think there's more to gain from it. I absolutely think that. So yeah, that's my opinion, and I really do think that would be a good way to continue even more.
I think
Martin,
this is
yeah.
Sorry,
Ruar, go for it.
I think this is a good place to sort of use that old cliche that a rising tide raises all boats. So and I think also, even though our styles can be sort of all over the place, really, we all are in a place where it's impossible for us to make cheap whiskey. So we all have to make as sure as we can that our quality actually can stand up to the prices we need to charge. So I think that sort of unites us as compared to the rest of the world anyway.
Thomas, Fary Lochan, Morten, what do you feel about this? Because I think Fary Lochan is probably, or the way I see it in terms of marketing, is probably the most kind of proudly Danish, whereas I don't think the others necessarily trade on their kind of country as much. Do you kind of like the badge of Nordic whiskey, or do you prefer Danish? And because you talk about Jutland whiskey, which kind of suggests you're putting yourself apart from other Danes rather than Nordics.
No, but for us, over the past 2 or 3 years, we've been working on like a Danish society of Danish whiskies, so that we can actually go as a united Danish whiskey power towards the international scene, because we know that just being small Fary Lochan wouldn't take us that far, but if we stand together, we will stand stronger. And I never thought about Fary Lochan or Danish whiskey as being a kind of a Nordic whiskey. But after tonight, and after trying these 3 other fantastic whiskies, I would be happy and very, very proud to be a part of a Nordic campaign towards the world of whiskey, because I'm very, very impressed. I don't know which one I would prefer, but I would just say that if this is the quality, if this is the standard of Nordic whiskies, we should be proud of ourselves and of the way we do things. And yes, we cannot be, we will never be bigger than Scotland or the US, but I think we can be at least as good or even better, because this is really promising, and I'm very proud of being a part of this lineup. So thank you.
Great. We're very, very proud to have you as part of it. Mika, Kala, what are your thoughts? I mean, Finland's not even Scandinavian; it's just Nordic. I mean, are you kind of upset at the other Scandinavians for not being part of Scandinavia, or?
No, I mean, we're a young nation. We were ruled by Sweden for lots of time, not that long ago.
Not that you're bitter about that.
No, we're just happy to be independent and in the scene, but like, it's ironic, since our distillery building, the old dairy where we're in, it's older than Finnish independence. So I think that sort of gives you a clue about how not known Finland as a country is around the world. So obviously we want to go for a wider set of shoulders when we go out. And I think then it becomes a question of how do we think about our customers, and how do we think about what's the added value to them for thinking about Nordic whiskies, and considering our massive range of flavor profiles, and using either rye or barley, doing Scottish style or doing like very exotic your own style. It doesn't really give you a clue of what's in the drink, but I think the most beautiful thing would be that when somebody in Taiwan or Japan or North America thinks about, I want to go see a whiskey distillery, I want to go see whiskey being made somewhere else, they would think of the Nordics rather than automatically, let's say, Scotland. And I think that would be the big win, in addition to preserving our wide variety of ways of making liquid.
Is anyone aware of any of your countries that are kind of starting a trade body? Because interestingly, I understand Iceland has had their whiskey protected by kind of European Union AOC, despite the fact, again, it's a very young whiskey region. But to my knowledge, there's no rules on any of the Nordic countries we're talking to tonight having that kind of legislation, is there?
We talked about.
I mean,
I don't think there are any.
Well, I mean, for instance, we were okay to bottle Danish whiskey in Scotland, but we couldn't bottle Icelandic whiskey in Scotland. Well, but there's no moves afoot to change that, is there?
Not yet, but there should be, I think.
Well, again, as an independent bottler, I'm not so sure. Let's not be too hasty. Quite happy to continue bottling in Scotland. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to go and ask some of the questions from the crowd here rather than just me nattering all night. So the question on screen from a man who I'm not going to offend by trying to pronounce his name. I'm sure it's a lovely name, but I can't pronounce it. To High Coast, where is the barley coming from, and what kind of barley do you use?
Yeah, we for the most of the time we use Pilsner malt as our barley, and the unpeated barley is grown and also malted in the southern part of Sweden. And the malted, the peated barley we buy from Scotland and also Belgium, because there is no one in Sweden making that high level of peated whiskey that we want. We usually tend to buy around 45 ppm in the malt, and the only one making it is a small on a small island outside of the mainland, and he makes for home brewers, and you can get like a small envelope of malted barley with 40 ppm, and we tend to buy a little bit more than a small envelope, and there's not that big envelopes in Sweden at the moment, so we get to buy from Scotland or Belgium when we do peated malt.
I think I'm right in saying Kiro's rye is all from Finland, and I think Fary Lochan's barley is all from Denmark. Ruar, Myken strikes me as a place that is not particularly fertile. Are you using Norwegian barley, or?
Yes, we are. When we started out, Norwegian malted barley was nowhere to be had in sufficient amounts that we could use. But about 3 years ago, some Norwegian farmers sort of took the leap, starting to produce varieties that we could use, which were not only protein. So I think this year, about 50% of our barley is Norwegian, and the rest of it is German or Belgian. But we are working towards getting steadily more Norwegian, because that makes it a bit more fun for us, makes it a bit more Norwegian altogether.
Cool. A question from Claire Tesh, who works for a wonderful company called Berry Brothers, asking, are any of the single malt distilleries tempted to start making rye, or vice versa? I suspect that Mika and Kala were not going to start making malt whiskey. Is this correct?
Yeah, all our production equipment and methods are geared towards making rye with the whole grain, the all grains in method. But Kalle, do you know even how to distill barley?
Never distill barley.
We're not paying any attention at Springbank.
That's an exception. Yeah, so basically when we started, and we actually realized in the beginning, we didn't know in the beginning that, hey, when we work with rye, it's completely different, because we don't have any husk in rye. So we don't, the lautering cannot happen the same way than with the barley. So basically, when we built out 3 distilleries or 3 expansions, it's always getting more and more towards what's the best way for producing rye. And we do make malt whiskey. It's your question, but the rye malt whiskey. But we want to keep in rye, because that's the only way we can actually keep our focus and really experiment what can you make of rye. And
you strike me as quite militant rye producers. Even if you could produce malted barley whiskey, you strike me as you probably wouldn't on sort of moral grounds. Is that correct?
Yes, it's very strict for us. All our products, all the alcohol is actually rye-based. Even in our, we have a cream liquor, we have our RTDs, we have our gin. It's always Finnish rye as a base for the alcohol.
It's the whole revolution.
Excuse me, Thomas. I've actually got the monopoly on puns this evening, so if you could just submit your puns to me, and I'll say them out loud. Ruar, do you have any plans to make rye whiskey? I guess you've got quite a small kind of dynamic setup.
We do, but until tonight, I wasn't really that fond of rye whiskey. But that changed tonight, of course. But I should never say never. But right now, I think we'll keep focusing on the barley. Everybody tells me that rye is so much harder to do the mashing and everything. So at least need to go to visit Kiro and learn about it first. But that might be fun.
Thomas Morton, again, I think you guys are pretty set on malt whiskey. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yep. I was going to say that after what we tasted today, why not try the rye? But when I talked to Morten earlier, he says we don't think so. I think we'll stick to the barley.
And Lars, any? I mean, could you send Roger into the mash tun to improve it and make some rye?
I probably could, but I don't think we will try to make rye whiskey. We have tried to make some use of like caramel malt or even chocolate malt. We're using but still using barley. I think we will keep on doing it. There are others that do the rye whiskey much better than we would. So Kiro is really good, and I think let them do the rye, and we will do the single malt, and we will both be much more better on what we do. I think
there are quite a few producers in the Nordics that make both rye and malt. I'm thinking mainly of Stonning as a kind of the main one, but I think Tirunpili make rye as well as malt. Is that right?
Yeah, and also Agitator in Sweden makes both. I know.
Yeah, there's a few out there. So yeah, good question. So the next one, this is from my mum. What does it mean to be part of the Nordic Casks that have been released by Berry Brothers and Rudd? This is not actually my mum, but it does sound like a bit of a sickly question. But yeah, I mean, I guess the question here is a good one, which is, do you think, starting with an independent bottling, because I know there's the first independent bottling from Myken and from Kiro, and on the second from Fary Lochan. Do you think it'll be? Do you think it kind of changes the way you're perceived, maybe by sort of more traditional Scotch nerds? I think probably Kiro first in that one, because I know you guys' audience is probably a bit younger, being kind of rye, and Finns are all kind of fashionable and cool and edgy. Do you think that this kind of helps with a sort of a more traditional demographic, or?
Yeah, I think so. This was something that me and Carl actually just talked about, that it's great to be here in company of such wonderful distillers. And while our demographic tends to skew a bit younger and maybe slightly more female in general, I think, we always try to make the liquid as good as we can and express different styles through that. And to be included in this lot is definitely a big win for us. And we'll happily take the added recognition that comes from the more Anuraki crowd through this.
Cool. Ruar, you look like you had something to say.
Yeah, I think just about any association with the Berry Brothers is going to sort of lift the perception people have of you anywhere. So this is definitely a great situation for us to be in.
Cool. And Fary Lochan, any further plans to sell some casks? I believe we have some new fill being filled with you very soon.
Well, but you can have as many as we want to sell to you.
It's a very politician answer, Thomas. I got another question from Swedish Whiskey Girl, who is presumably both Swedish and a girl. Myken, do you find the Arctic climate has an effect on the whiskey? And what's the angel share? It's quite an interesting concept.
Yeah.
Actually. I know in Texas, for instance, it's like 22%, and in Scotland it's 2%. So do your casks actually fill up so cold? Or?
No, it's a good question. Perhaps not the Arctic climate as such, but certainly the coastal climate that we have out here. We are so far out in the ocean that we are basically in the Gulf Stream, so it never gets really cold here. I guess -2, -3, sort of the the coldest we see in the winter. It never gets really hot in the summer, but we have a lot of big changes in air pressure. Humidity changes a lot, and there's enough wind to push even the most resistant salt molecule into our headspace in the cask. So I'm pretty sure that over time we will see more and more of the sort of local character seep into our spirit as well, particularly sort of the salty marine aromas that you might expect from out here on the coast. And we're starting to get a little bit of statistics on our ancient share, and so far, being young, we've been using quite a lot of small casks, 40 liters, 50 liters, etc. And over a 4 or 5 year periods, we can easily lose about 30% of the contents of those casks because of the higher surface area, of course. But I think in the bigger casks, we're not that far away from what you would see in Scotland. So, but there again, we haven't really emptied that many of the big ones. I guess the one that you bought was there's quite a few liters missing in that one. It was filled with about 202 liters to begin with.
It's always a good sign if stuff disappears in the warehouse. It means someone's helping themselves to a little sample, I think, which is a sign of quality. A question from Alice. Also known as Ingvar, to all producers, the price of Nordic whiskey abroad is sometimes fairly high. Are you afraid that overseas consumers will just buy one bottle to impress their friends with no repeat sales?
That's a good question.
Yeah, I can tune in. I think all the different markets are quite unique, or every market is quite unique. We are on quite a few markets at the moment, and only comparing the different Asian countries is so different. Like in Japan, they tend to buy whiskey that you can find in bars, and they try the whiskey at the bar and they want to buy a bottle, and they really need to like the whiskey that they buy. And in China, where we also sell, they're much more like the question was asked. They really want to impress everybody with high price. So it's quite easy to sell in China if you just put a big price tag on. Which is
not the answer you meant to give, Lars. It's meant to be about quality here. You're meant to say whiskey's really good, so we'll buy it.
Of course. but quality is always the main focus of our production. And I think of all 4 distilleries that are in here today, but all markets are unique, I would say. So it's really hard to give a proper answer on how to sell to every country in the world, because all countries are different. And yeah.
Myken, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, so it's a really, really good question. And for us, we are not only militant about rye, but we are pretty militant about our price points, because it's a difficult thing to manage, as you all know, price points across different alcohol taxes. So all of our home countries who are here, we have crazy high alcohol taxes. And then you want to present bottles in low tax countries for sort of the same price, or your core customer at your home doesn't feel that we're screwing them over. So it's a lot of management, but we take a very hands-on approach and make sure that we end up on the shelves wherever we are in a manageable price. Of course, there are offshoots, and some retailer will price how they will, and let's just say some independent bottlings might be quite a lot higher than our core range, but that's okay because it's single cask.
I think you'll find that shipping from Myken is horrendously expensive.
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. But it's a really good point. And if we are ever to achieve any sort of other fame than just niche fame, where we need to be mindful of that.
Anyone else want to comment on that one? Cool. Okay, we got a question from Arthur. It's partially a brag as well that he was at a beer and whiskey festival in Stockholm. I'll permit that one. Arthur says, I went to a beer and whiskey festival in Stockholm when only Mackmyra were producing whiskey. The brewers were amazing. Did the craft beer scene movement grow into distilling, or is it a separate scene? And then as a little PS, I saw you put further down, PS, there was a great after party which Emma was at, and Roger and the box guys were drinking Mackmyra and saying, I'm not going to do the accent, I'm saying, hey, we can improve on this. I love the Swedish whiskey scene, miss it. So yeah, I mean, it's sort of Swedish, Nordic, because, you know, Nordic craft brewers, you know, kind of have their fame as well. Is it quite a different scene, or same kind of people in them, or?
I would say it's a different scene. The beer scene is there are people that really are into the beer, and there are people that are really into the whiskey. And some of the guys like both beer and whiskey, but they're like really nerds. They're only into whiskey or only into beer, I would say.
Anyone else have a comment on that one?
No, I just, I agree what Lars said. There's a few brewers that have talked about distilling, and I guess that it's easier said than done when you go from one thing to another. But I agree that there's two scenes here, but I'm sure that some have, you know, have started the process and thought the thought, you know.
I see I've got a few other questions aside. One saying, what's your take on blending? And I have to say, thinking of future releases of the Nordic casks, and I haven't pitched this to the company yet, and I'm pretty sure they'll say no. But I did sort of think we're putting together a Nordic blend, maybe focusing on really good sherry casks, but just a little portion, so it's quite a small batch blend. I mean, what do you think of the idea of a Nordic blended malt, or again, does that kind of seem like a kind of muddying of the water? I think there has been one. Thomas Obom, you have been quite quiet on this, and I think you told me the other day there has been a Nordic blended malt before.
Yeah, there's one Swedish product which is wonderful. It's a blended malt. It's Smögen and High Coast whiskey. Fantastic product. As for a blended Nordic whiskey or for any of the countries, I don't think we're really there, because there's not a whole lot of grain whiskey production. Yeah. So it would have to be a blended malt.
Yeah. And it was Smögen and Ven, actually, like Per said.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Cool. Another question coming in from David. Do you think it's more possible for distilleries in the Nordic countries to dance their own tune with not so many whiskey consultants that are so strong in Scotland? Which is a fair point. You know, a lot of the new Scottish distilleries use the same consultant, which was Dr. Jim Swan, and you know, Jim Swan certainly, you know, knew how to make whiskey in a certain style, but a lot of the new distilleries kind of use his model, whereas the Nordic distilleries, you know, don't really have this kind of single consultant that just kind of make whiskey. Who wants to start on that one? Lars, are you so frantic to speak in the camera, or are you just trying to fight off, or what's the?
I just lost my sound, so but I think I hear you at the moment. So, but I missed the question. So,
the question was, do you think that it's more possible for distilleries in the Nordic countries to dance their own tune with not so many whiskey consultants that are so strong in Scotland, i.e., kind of production consultants telling startups how to make whiskey?
Yep, it's also a very good question. Probably, I think, like I was mentioning before, there is so many whiskey nerds in Sweden that really they really want to idolize one single company, and that's really good for us. So it's quite easy for us to really say that we make really good whiskeys, and we have a fan base that really likes us. I'm not sure if it's that different to Scotland, but yeah.
Anyone else want to come in on that? I mean, I'm aware that Kiro went to Springbank to learn to make whiskey, so that's kind of a consultant right there. But how did Thomas Fary Lochan, how did Jens kind of learn to make whiskey? I mean, I know he made a trip to Daft Mill, but I don't think necessarily did a sort of distilling course or anything with him.
No. Well, when he started, there was also a thing called internet by that time, so he studied a lot on that, and he had a good friend, and he's still a friend of us, Ian Miller from Scotland, and he's helped us out a lot in the beginning to improve the process of distilling and everything. So. But again, it's we were among the first ones in Denmark, and we help each other in Denmark. So we get a lot of the new distilleries coming to us to ask for advice, and we ask for advice in the beginning from people smarter than us with more experience. So and we are happy to help. So I guess that for Danish whiskey, we are good at helping each other. And being each other's consultants. But again, we are all free, and we do exactly what we want to do. We make the whiskies we like the best, and we're not. I don't think we're trying to please anybody else than ourselves.
Well, it seems to be working, so I would continue doing that. Cool. Well, I think we'll probably wrap up there. I need to say a massive thank you to both Thomas and Emma for their time as Nordic whiskey authorities, and thank you to everyone from the distilleries for your time, and also for opening your warehouses metaphorically to Berry Brothers to give us these absolutely glorious casks. So guys, thank you very, very much. Other thanks must go out also to Claire, who has been sending up all the questions and really kind of pulled together this tasting and all the cool marketing bits that made it look really good. And also, if you would like to buy these bottles, which I believe a beautiful picture is about to spring up. It's a lovely picture, I have to say. You may recognize the wallpaper. These bottles are available from our very good friends in the UK, Royal Mile Whiskies. They are available from Berry Brothers and Rudd Retail. They are available internationally from Kirsch in Germany, from Whiskey Base in Netherlands, from Clydesdale in Sweden, and from Charles Hofer in Switzerland. And maybe next year we'll even bottle them at under 60% ABV, and they'll be available in Norway as well. But I can't promise on that one. But yeah, like I say, I really hope this is going to be a developing project for Berry Brothers. We have got a lot of Nordic casks in our warehouses now. So if these don't sell, I'm likely to get fired for wasting company money. So please go forth and buy them. But no, moreover, again, thank you guys for joining me. I think it's been a wonderful tasting. I think the drams have been utterly phenomenal, as backed up by the stream of lovely comments coming in. So I think that's us, guys. So thank you very much.
And thank you,
very
Johnny.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.
Cool.
Cheers.